Welcome back everyone, Rob Marzullo here from Ram Studio Comics. So now I'm going to walk through a couple poses with you that are grounded. So this is going to be the 8.5 heads tall model that I like to use. Generally I'll work from this and even go above this. I very rarely go below this unless the character is very short and stocky. But the main thing here is to show you how that, by grounding it to a surface, that you have to kind of maneuver your pose a little bit more and think about it a little bit more deliberately in the way that it relates to, the stance of the legs. Like whenever you draw a character that's floating off the page, you can kind of cheat, right? So this becomes another level of trickiness, I think, I don't know if I should have said trickiness, but you know what I mean? Like just, it becomes a little bit trickier to accomplish because you have to think about that ground plane. You got to get the feet to look like they're mounted to that surface. Now, in this case, I'm keeping it pretty rough and I'm trying to leave it rough for as long as possible. I talk about that a lot in a lot of my videos because I feel that that's the area where you get creative. Now, once you've made all these different choices with the pose and the way the hand is, the way the feet might turn out, whatever the case may be, the anatomy, then you can get back in there like I'm doing here and refine it a bit more. But it's because I've already worked through a couple rough stages of allowing myself to just think about it. Like that's kind of the way I look at it when I'm roughing out a design. I'm just thinking about the way it might look. I'm not making any immediate choices yet. That comes later after I've soft erased one or two times, usually two or three, and then I go back in and refine the line work and make my final decisions. Not that this is a great pose, not that this is perfection. I can always go back and re-edit this. And one of the things I want to make sure that I mention in this particular video, if you leave your poses a little bit less descriptive and a less finalized, then save them that way so that you can always go back and change them and say, you know what? I figured out a better way to do the legs. I'm going to change the pose. The upper body's good here, but maybe the legs could be better, so on and so forth. But if you finalize everything, then you kind of get in the habit of just, leaving it and calling it done. I don't know. To me personally, I like to use my work as much as possible to benefit me and keep moving forward. So now with this next pose, I want to do male and female. And this one, again, I want you to really pay attention to how rough I start out. I just think that's really important because early on when I was trying to get better at drawing, I was always trying to make the lines as clean as possible in the beginning. And then I would go to comic shows and I would watch people sketch and scribble. And I'm like, wow, how are you, making that scribble look so cool at the end? It's because they were realizing the importance of not just the gesture, which is very important, obviously, just a flow that you're trying to get with the body. You're not forcing yourself to be too static or too strict with your lines in the beginning, which stiffens up the character. And I can see here the leg's really off, and I wanted that bend to the leg, but it doesn't make sense. So I show you there with a balance line, which actually the balance line was crooked, forgive me. But usually you can draw a line right up the middle of your character, usually in position in relationship to the head, and you'll find a balance line. Not always, but in this case, I realized that the leg was too oddly shaped for there to be balance. So she's obviously got half her weight up on that rock formation or whatever that started out as a cube, and then I had to shift the leg. But the other thing I want you to pay attention to with a pose like this, or any of them really, even the pose before, is there's this backwards bend that you get. A forward bend to the upper femur and a back bend to the lower leg. Even though it's subtle sometimes, it's very important. I'm going to illustrate that after this video. I'm going to do a draw through real quick just to kind of hit some of these points home, hopefully for you. But it's little things like that that end up making poses just kind of work or they don't. Now, again, this pose, you could critique it, and I'm sure it's not perfect by any means, but it's from the imagination. There's no reference, and it's doable. It's something I could probably take and draw over this and turn it into, one person pointed out as I shared the work, it kind of looked like Rogue from Jungle Island, which actually makes, or I think it's called Savage Rogue, which makes me actually want to do that because I love that interpretation of the character. So I'll do a draw through right now and I'll show you a couple more tips or talk about it some more. Okay, so what I wanted to show you here, one of the reasons why I did this ground plane where I show this kind of gridded pattern was to force myself to think a little bit more perspectively. The body, like anything else, has to fall into perspective. So what these lines do for me is they allow me to think about the way the foot might actually line up to the surface of the ground plane. If you get in the habit of always drawing on a blank white canvas, then it's a little bit harder to envision that, and you may make some mistakes. Likewise, if you find your vanishing point, so if you were to pull these all the way back to a vanishing point, usually you're going to see it illustrated like this, and this is going to be your horizon line, right? You're also going to be able to draw out from that and kind of figure out if you're looking up at this character. So essentially, when you look at the face here, you could say, well, you're probably going to see a little bit of the underneath of the jaw here, kind of like I've illustrated with this girl over here. So, and you see it a little bit under the chest, but maybe you get a little bit more visual under the chest, and a little bit more visual under the sternum. So when you think about perspective in that regard, it helps you solve issues like that with your character design. So it's very important to keep that in mind. That's essentially why I drew that little starting point there. And again, it just gives you that reference point to build up on your character. Now, the thing that I want you to be aware of, there's obviously just a lot of stuff that goes into drawing bodies correctly, and it's a lot of practice, a lot of gesture drawing, a lot of figure drawing, stylized drawing, all that and above, right? One of the really important things, though, I think, is kind of what I was talking about before. We have this forward bend, and I like to draw it on the front of the leg here like this. Put a little circle there for the knee, and then a back bend. I don't know if you could notice that when I was laying out the pose, but that's really important to get in there. And the more you you should always do draw-throughs of even actual poses of like athletic people and things like that. You'll start to see this kind of stuff. And again, it's kind of this forward bend, backwards bend. You can see it here on him, forward bend, backward bend. Now, it doesn't have to be too awfully dramatic, but it needs to be in there. It needs to be evident. And once you do that, you start paying attention to a lot of the rhythms from the anatomy and the structure of the body. Another one that I like to do is like this, where I picture the shoulder coming down like this, over, back like this, and then, well, from this angle, it would come over like this. Okay, so, and this almost helps you with like shading as well, because you could, look at that and you go, well, that's basically might be a way I might add shading or whatever. But essentially, if the arm's just sitting to the side, it really works out because you go, okay, the shoulder's off like this, comes up, and then here's the front of the bicep, goes back, and then here's the top of the arm. So it looks like these little lightning bolts, right? And this is just a quick way to really make sure that you have this little bit of flow going on, and you can quickly draw over it and go, okay, I want the tricep here, the forearm here, tapers down, gets really thin to the wrist. I never seem to make it thin enough to the wrist because it gets really thin, and then you get this nice hulking hand if you're doing superheroes or whatever. But you see how really quickly you can get that arm into place. So these flows that you pay attention to with the body make this stuff a lot easier to draw from the mind. And then you're not sitting there scouring the internet looking for the right pose, because although that's great for studying, good luck trying to do that on a deadline. I was doing that a lot for storyboards, and it really drained me. It was just like, I just want to draw it from my head. Either you like it or you don't. So that's where I'm at these days. But not with storyboards, but doing it for comics and this stuff. So anyways, hopefully this video is helpful for you. I'd love to know what you think in the comments section below. More importantly, too, I'd love to know what you want to see in the future, whether or not it's course content or a YouTube video or just the artwork that I post. It really helps me gauge what I'm doing and where I need to focus my efforts. So I love that feedback. So thanks very much for watching today. Keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.